Welcome to Swinger University. I'm Ed.
And I'm Phoebe.
Today we are super excited to be interviewing Alex Liu, writer, director, narrator, and protagonist in a documentary called A Sexplanation, exploring issues concerning sexual stigma, shame, pleasure, and pride in the context of debates over comprehensive sex education. And he had 4 film festival nominations and won 9 film festivals from 2021 to 2022.
Alex's work explores taboo topics like sex and drugs to deepen our understanding of science, morality, and living meaningfully. A former health reporter for CNN, Nova Science Now, and NPR, his debut feature documentary, A Sexplanation, was named a New York Times Critics' Pick and won the 2023 American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors and Therapists Audiovisual Award and LGBTQ+ Journalists Excellence in Documentary Award.
For those who have not watched this documentary, shame on you. Although we're talking about not shaming people.
Right.
But absolutely go see this. It's a comedic and universal search for love, connection, and self-acceptance. Addresses sex education and lack thereof, and shame about sex and how we identify. There's interviews with psychologists, scientists, therapists, and a Jesuit priest. Threw them all in there. It sounds like a joke, actually. A therapist, a scientist, and a Jesuit priest walk into a bar. The overarching theme of trying to get people to critically think about sexuality and that sex is fun, pleasurable, and it's okay to talk about it.
To us, you are a champion for fighting sexual stigma, shame, and helping people embrace pleasure. The more people like you that can bring these topics to light is a win for everyone. We try to do the same for Swinger community by addressing these same issues, and your documentary deeply resonated with us. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. That was an amazing introduction. I really appreciate the time.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you went to go from studying molecular biology, toxology, to reporter and filmmaker.
So I think the kind of through line of my life has really been trying to understand and grapple with my sexuality. Identify as a gay man, and I think for, I grew up in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and the depictions there were, if I heard about gay people, it would be through the lens of HIV/AIDS. It was not really, it's hard to believe when you think about how taboo being gay was because it's changed so rapidly. But there was nothing out there. I was just barely keeping my head around water trying to understand my same-sex attraction. And the one place that, definitely the church was not helpful. It was harmful. And the one place that I found that actually started to help me make sense of things were the sciences, specifically the biological sciences. So I spent a lot of time kind of trying to figure this out, and it became clear, I feel much better because I realized, not only have I never thought critically about any of these morals, ideas, taboos, but most of the people around me have never thought about it. And as you dig more and more, you realize that almost every taboo topic, sex, drugs, everything, so much of good information has been kept from us for various reasons. And the more and more I understood that, the kind of angrier I got. Right. And I think that I've just reached a point where I was like, well, I'm complaining all the time about why isn't there good sex education out there? Why isn't there good drug education out there? To the point where I was like, well, if no one else is doing it, let's see what I can do. And so I started this path of science reporting, health reporting, starting putting stuff on YouTube. And that led me to making this documentary, to making this explanation. Yeah.
That's fantastic. It's funny, as you were describing that, we had a similar feeling when we started talking about doing the podcast, where it was like, yeah, there's lots of podcasts out there that talk about swingers and swinger parties and how cool it was to have sex with multiple people, and it's the hip thing and everybody should do it. And so much of it didn't resonate with us, and it wasn't from kind of like an education standpoint. Sure, it was informative, but it wasn't really digging into some of these deeper topics. And so, if nobody else is going to do it, I guess we're going to start doing it.
That's right. Great. Yeah, I fully feel like that's the beauty. I mean, the issues with media today, but that's one of the beautiful parts, is that you can kind of do it yourself now.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what are some of the challenges that you faced when you're working on this film? Because you really had to switch gears. I mean, I'm sure there was a massive learning curve. And
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was trained in straight journalism, right? Which is kind of dying right now, which is be as objective as possible, be as unbiased as possible. It's a straight factual story, don't put yourself in it. And I think that's good advice for most reporting, and whenever I would pitch stories around sex education, drug education, I think if I would have pitched them now, they would probably be taken by a lot of these publications. But back then they were like, oh, we don't want to talk about these things. And so, I found myself just increasingly frustrated, and I think for a good reason. I was probably more on the activist side of things than the journalism side of things, the way I was pitching these stories. And so I was like, well, I'm just gonna do it myself, and I think the biggest challenge for me in doing all this was really trying to process why I was doing this, because the initial instinct was to come to a place of preachiness, of anger. I'm going to tell the world why they're wrong and why I'm right. Right. Which is not a pleasurable experience to watch, right? No one likes to watch an incredibly didactic. I was almost becoming like the mirror image of the people I did not like, that I was railing against, right? And I think early cuts of the film are a little too hot in that sense. It is very much me talking down to the world, and I think it took years, therapy. It took bringing in other artists who could help me see what I wasn't able to see at the time, but also just talking to a lot of people. I think the biggest takeaway from this whole process is because you're forced to sit and listen to people who you disagree with in a way you never would maybe in an actual one-on-one human interaction, because my instinct would be to like immediately start a fight or to not listen to a complete thought. The only way to get the respect that you want is to respect others, to listen to others, even if you disagree, to really respect their point of view, that they come to it honestly. For the most part, there are people, bad actors, bad faith actors, for sure. But for the most part, I think most people are just trying to figure out the best they know with the tools they've been given, how to figure these things out. So I'm locking in very quickly, I think also that, wow, like actually this is much more interesting of a film, of a documentary, a piece of work. If it is more about me like trying to let go of my agenda and approach it from a much more blank slate point of view. And that's when we started doing that, that's when it really clicked in.
Nice.
And that's when I started to kind of really dig back about like, oh, well, like, you put on a front, a shield for so long when you're gay like that, and you're ready to attack at any moment, and you're ready to, and you contort yourself into how you think people need to see you in order to be comfortable with you, and all those little things. Like when you put a camera in front of you, it's a total mindfuck, right? It's just processing all of that has been the best gift, the gift of really listening and respecting where people come from, and starting from there before anywhere else. Yeah.
I'm getting what you're saying, and I can relate to when you get emotionally charged about something, and it's kind of like an email, and they always say, rewrite it 3 times before you send it, or sleep on it, right? Where there's that process of you're just going through it, and you're asking questions, and you're living it, and you're lashing out, and then there's periods of reflectiveness, and then you start to ask the why. Like you said, you start asking why, what is it about these people that aren't getting it? What or what is their perspective, so that I can understand? Because that's what usually the reason, the hardest thing I have with is, what is their thought process? Why can't they see what I see? And so
that empathy standpoint from it,
stepping in their shoes.
Empathy, that's what it is.
Remembering back to the documentary, there was the one scene where you were interviewing the congressman, the senator, I can't remember what his exact title was. Yeah. And was that filmed before or after you came to this realization?
It was after, although maybe in the middle of it. I think that was actually so we spoke to a very conservative Utah State Senator. His name is Todd Wheeler, and Todd Weiler, made a name for himself by trying to declare pornography a public health crisis in the state of Utah. Right. So I was ready, I think, to go to battle with him. But by the time I was at the process of meeting with him, I was kind of coming to the realization at that point, like, what if instead of this being like a moment where I take him down, which was my initial instinct, is what if I try to find a point of common agreement? Like, what if I tried that? Like, let's start from there, and then we can talk about our disagreements. And I think that was the first interview where we have some great moments, you know, where I'm talking about porn with him, like, you know, like, and you know, it was very clear, very obvious, like, we're never going to agree.
Right. Yes.
But it doesn't mean he's not like a human being who's coming about. I mean, I can be pretty cynical of politics, but I genuinely, for the most part, believe, based on his upbringing, based on you know, how he grew up, the state of Utah, that he's coming to his thoughts honestly, and he was willing to engage with me in a way that I didn't think. That I wasn't willing to engage with him, honestly, at the beginning. Right. So that was a great deal. I was like, okay, you know what? Actually, this might be something. And that's one of my favorite interviews because we actually, I think, come to a point of at least respecting our humanity, if not our points of view.
Yeah. And I think I saw it really as a moment where you really do start to understand that everybody comes to wherever they are today through a different path. Yeah. And, you know, people come into swinging through different paths. People come into their own sexuality through different paths. And it was nice because you got to see that other perspective. It would have actually been a very boring movie. It wouldn't have been, but it would have been a boring movie if everybody just agreed with you, right? Like you wouldn't have had a point of contention, or the fact that, there's quote a villain in the story, which is everybody's got a different opinion on it. And we all have to come to some kind of a level understanding of, hey, you know, we might be able to cut back on teenage pregnancy if we had a better understanding of how actual pregnancy works, you know?
Right. Imagine the thought. Yeah.
Right.
The other part I really liked about the film, or there are many parts, but that sex is a huge form of expression, and it's so critically important to discovering who we are. And we look all around us and sex is everywhere. It's in advertising. It's all over Instagram, for crying out loud. Right. Even though they keep trying to nerf our site and take things down as educators.
Instagram took me down. They took me down. Yeah.
What?
I had to fight them. Yeah. I was like, no, this is not pornography. Yeah. Yeah.
Every day. There's other aspects where this sex and expression is coming out. I mean, they've got lubes and vibrators on the top shelf at Walmart now, and there's just this struggle with being able to come out and express ourselves, but then shed that shame. In the lifestyle, we are starting to see a change in the last 10 years where more men are coming out as bisexual and feeling that freedom to express themselves in that environment. And I love that. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but that's some of the changes that we are seeing. But then yet with this education, we just are so far behind, and which is why people are turning to porn to educate themselves. And the communities, I think, are huge and really important to all of us, which I also want to talk about the LGBTQ community as well in a second. But I also want to talk about two things that you did in the movie that I thought were really, really challenging. Was one, coming out to your parents, and then, oh my God, masturbating in front of people for science. I was like, you are so brave.
Or stupid, isn't it? That was one of the first shots we did, actually, the masturbation. That was one of the first things we did. It was jumping off the deep end for sure.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and the least sexy environment you can think of.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, even if you're by yourself, but the added pressure of having a film crew making sure you achieve orgasm in 10 minutes. It has to be in 10 minutes.
Wow.
Because MRI time is expensive, and so. The takeaway from that is that it's kind of crazy how important sex is to all of our lives. I think in many ways it is some of the most meaningful and definitely pleasurable experiences you can have, spiritual in many ways. Yeah. But there's no money to study it. the study we're doing in this case was just trying to understand how the genitals and the brain are connected. Like, they just don't know how at all. They know a lot about every other body part, but they skip over the genitals when they do these studies. And so, you know, it is like in the film, we have an embryonic understanding of just the basic biology of sex and sexuality. And so the process was terrifying for sure. And my only note to them was that they should provide silicone lube instead of water-based, because it is
yes 100%.
I get that it's way harder to clean, but that was the biggest challenge, I think, for sure. But yeah, you just, you know, I think before and after that, you know, if you can do that, the rest in terms of the shame aspect, I think is nothing really comes close. So,
right?
Yeah, quite literally. And so it was it was great to do my part for science. Yeah, for sure.
My part for science. I love that. And so then when you came out to your parents, what was the hardest part? Was it their feelings, being concerned for their feelings and how they process the information? What was it?
I mean, my dad's reaction, which I kind of expected, was of what I did not expect. I've only seen him cry twice, once when his dog died and once when I came out to him. And it was a, like, I don't know what this means. I'm very scared, but I'm always here for you. Like, I'm always here for you. But I do find the idea of two men being intimate, like, just disgusting. And so that's where we started from. Yeah. And now, you know, 20 plus years later, we're talking about my masturbation habits and of a movie that's been released around the world, right? So that's just my one thing to say. Like, it's possible. It takes two to tango. You know, both people have to want to work on that relationship. But yeah, the fear I think any kid in the 90s would have is you know, what does it mean? Like, are you going to be able to be part of the family anymore? And how are you part of the family? Am I going to have to just totally hide huge parts of myself in order to still fit in? And I think, thankfully, like, you know, I probably have a little too much bitterness at current, you know, Gen Zers who don't have to go through that, who had boyfriends or girlfriends in middle school.
Right.
But you know, I'm mostly happy that that's the case now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's if you take the Brene Brown definition of shame, which is that you just don't belong for who you are, that's the ultimate fear that I had. Yeah.
You don't belong for who you are? Was that what she said?
Yeah. Rather than something like guilt or embarrassment, which is like you've done something wrong. You know, the fundamental core aspect of shame, I think, is that you don't belong. You don't fit in. You're not accepted. That and for something you can't control. Yeah. Sometimes I will take the moment to think about how scary that was. I 17 years old, I developed a case of the shingles because I was just so stressed out. You know, it was such a horrible time. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So it's been something that, you know, I think only since making this film have I truly fully processed. And people often ask me, like, does that mean you're cured of your shame? Like, do you no longer feel shame? And I'm like, no. Like, that is a deep part of my imprinting, you know. Right. I constantly feel shame. But I'm able to process it much faster. I'm able to understand it much faster. I have the tools now that I can work through it that it doesn't control my life. Whereas in the past, you know, I considered suicide because I just didn't know how to deal with this thing that just so overran every aspect of my being.
Gosh, yeah. I was thinking about the swinger community and people that have come out. Largely, most people do not. The people that do come out usually come out to their kids only because their kids basically know. The kids are smart, right?
Right. They pick up on it.
They stress about it, and their kids are like, "Oh,
we've known for years. What are you talking about?
Whatever. Finally, thanks. Now we can talk about it." You know, but we also have had people come out to their parents and lost their whole family, like aunts, uncles, like everybody.
I mean, in a way, I think, coming out as a non-monogamous, however you want to frame it, like that to me is much more challenging than coming out as gay, because for whatever, I have complicated feelings about this, but it's like you come out as gay, but you can still fit into the monogamous marriage, archetype.
The patriarchy still fits,
right. It still fits, and it doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
Even though probably gay people are some of the most non-monogamous people in the world, but I'm actually kind of curious, like, do you feel like that it's something that you want to come out about? Like, does it, in a way that, like, I just couldn't hide being gay, right? But I could much more easily hide being non-monogamous, And so is that something that you feel it does feel like a thing, like this kind of barrier that you're trying to overcome? Yeah,
it's interesting. So we sort of came out when we released our faces publicly on YouTube, October 2022. Because we've been doing the podcast, and the nice thing about podcasts is they're completely anonymous, right? It's just these disembodied voices coming through the speakers, right? It's like radio versus TV. And we actually felt very disingenuous by not showing our faces. We're supposed to be destigmatizing swinging, right? It's okay to be swingers, and yet we're hiding behind microphones.
Yeah.
So for us, we came to a point where we're like, okay, there are challenges here. We don't know what this is going to mean for our jobs or,
I know,
people coming forward with it. And we were like, well, okay, we checked for the morality clauses in our employment. They didn't exist. So we're like, okay, we're good there.
Yeah.
Like, they can't legally fire us because of that. But we had no idea who was going to stumble across our YouTube channel and our social media and see our faces.
Yeah.
So there was this kind of fear of coming out, but we also kind of felt empowered by doing it to just say, you know what, screw it. We're just going to do it, and we're going to see what happens.
And ironically, nothing.
Yeah, but the crickets.
Absolutely no.
In a couple different ways. It was kind of.
Well, that's good to hear, because I mean, I get a little nervous for YouTube, but because that's the hard one for people to process. That is definitely a hard one, I think. Yeah,
and so far, knock on wood, we've had a few kind of spicy comments on YouTube about the lifestyle and whatnot. But for the most part, it's actually been really positive for us. Now, we know if we ever become internet famous and we really blow up, that's going to get worse, right? The trolls all come out at that point.
Yeah.
But it's been kind of liberating, because we're able to express ourselves openly, at least in some parts. Now, we haven't come out to our family. Our family doesn't know about our secret, lifestyle and all of that.
The reason I haven't is that I know for a fact it would cause my mother great pain, and I'm not interested in inflicting a lot of pain. I mean, for what point? I mean, she's in her 90s, and so what?
Yeah.
It would be so traumatic for her that I just thought, I just don't want to inflict that. There really is no reason for it. Now, some people who are polyamorous, it does become necessary at some point, because they're involving different, they're melding families together. And so it gets difficult to hide. And that is just who they are. They innately want to be with more than one person. It's how they feel best, and so in those situations, a lot of polyamorous people do come out. But we have not done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's also good is there are some great organizations out there, the Woodhull Freedom Foundation, and then there's the Open. And Open is in San Francisco, based in San Francisco. They're doing things a lot on the the legislative side, changing language for benefits, changing
wow.
language
That's great.
for businesses so that you can't be discriminated against for not being monogamous. So that's really promising, and hopefully we'll be working with them and doing some things for them as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because you kind of pointed this out. There's so many parallels between the LGBTQ community and kind of the path and journey that community and the social stigma around it has gone through, and kind of where they are now. Like, not to equate the two, but sort of, there's some parallels though, for sure, with the lifestyle community, in that, there's social stigma involved in this. There's a preconceived concept of this is what a relationship is supposed to be, and both communities are still struggling with that to a large degree. I guess the one thing that we have to our favor is it's kind of a secret, and we can kind of do it. And there's something kind of fun about it being a secret taboo thing.
There is that for sure. That can definitely be a turn on. I get that.
Right. But I could see, like, you couldn't go out with your partner, 20 years ago in public without, potentially
huge
life-threatening consequences.
Yeah.
But we could go out on a double date with another couple and everybody's like, oh, look, they're friends.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. I'm curious, do you feel like that your relationship improved once you started swinging? Like, do you feel like it was, it brought you closer in any way? Like, because that's the one thing I think about when I think of polyamory, non-monogamy. Like, you just have to be better communicators. Like, that's just kind of, and that opens that's great for all aspects of a relationship. Yeah.
I think our sexual expression has improved because we had to talk about things. I think our communication was forced to improve because you got to talk about this stuff, because if you just internalize it, it's just going to eat you up. And that deprogramming from your traditional upbringing, your religious upbringing, wherever you came from, you got to get that out. And you have to have that conversation. So we used to spend long periods of time at night just talking about stuff and going through stuff. So I think it's helped us. It's one of the big reasons why we say swinging will absolutely break a fragile marriage. It is not one of those things. And you could say the same thing for any kind of non-monogamy.
Totally.
If you were, let's say, dating multiple people and one of them started to get really attached and you were like, I want to keep dating on the side. That breaks the whole thing apart.
Yeah.
So absolutely. It either forces the change or it forces you to change.
Yeah. I love that. That's kind of what I was thinking with the movie. It forced me to talk about a lot of things I had never talked about. And with people, I have my creative partner, Leo Neri, who is a co-writer, basically it's both of our movies. Nice. And we had just so many endless conversations that I never thought I'd ever have, very deep, about tons of shame and shameful experiences that coming out, I'm like, what have I just kept this to myself my entire life, and just let it eat me up inside and never sharing this with anyone else. What I hope the movie can do is that it's a nice kind of way to break the ice with someone. Some of the best responses we've gotten are like, we watched your movie and I was pausing it every 10 minutes to talk about what I was seeing with my partner of 50 years. And we had conversations we never had before. And that to me just, oh my God, if that's all that comes out of this movie, it blows my mind, because that's all I really want.
Nice.
It's tough. It's hard. It's painful, but pointing a light at any of the shame is the best kind of disinfectant. So that's what the goal was.
Yeah. So what would you say is your most rewarding aspect of producing that film and starring in that film and the whole thing, the project? What was the most rewarding piece of that?
I mean, honestly, it's kind of, what I just said, I can't believe, we made a movie that we were hoping so bad that at least it would be entertaining. At least it would bring light and help people think, that if I'm vulnerable enough that I could get someone to think a little bit more about their life, like little moments that maybe they had never thought much about. The outpouring of people who said, like, I'm now closer to my significant other after watching your film. I've now had a conversation with my parents I never thought I would have. And I've had a conversation that I never thought was possible. But I do think, like, there are no easy, simple answers or no silver bullets. And I think that the change you want to see comes baby step at a time, a million little baby steps from a million different interactions. And to think that maybe we moved people a little bit in the right direction has just been so rewarding, because this movie's made, it's pieced together with like Elmer's glue and Scotch tape. And so the idea that this little idea that we had could actually spark conversations that I believe need to be had. I just get very overwhelmed with gratitude that anyone connected.
That's awesome.
I want to talk about the LGBTQ community and what it means to you. What does the community do for you? How does it make you feel? How important is that community?
It's the first time I ever felt normal. I think it's there's something about, although I wonder now how different it is, because we're all so fragmented now. In some ways it's good in that you can really find your specific community much more easily. Right. But when I was coming out, late 90s, early 2000s, there was only one place and all the queers went there, so it was overwhelming and scary at first, but you really get to meet and feel a sense of community with a large group of people. And like, I don't know if that exists as much as it used to, common spaces like that, where you can talk to butch lesbians, drag queens, all in the same space, kind of talking and having disagreements and sing leather daddies to lipstick lesbians, all of it. It was such a beautiful experience for me, in terrifying, of course, at first, to think, this idea I had of being normal or craving to be normal maybe wasn't as important as I made it out to be. And I think the best distinction I've come to is like, who is typical? Who has the stereotypical sexuality? All of us have something that's a little atypical, and that's normal. And I think that's the best part of being in that community taught me, is that the only thing we have in common is that we all understand what it means to be different. And so that's been a really a great message, I think, that I've carried forward, is that it's beautiful to be different. And it really does teach you that the closest you can come to being your authentic self is the closest you can come to, if I might be so bold, some sort of spiritual otherness, God, if you want to call it that. Because it's hard, but when you're free, there's no better feeling.
Yeah. We're starting to find that more in the ethical non-monogamy community. You've got different aspects of the community. You've got the part of the community that really just wants to party and have a good time, and we see everybody naked and we're watching naked porn live. Oh, that's really cool. let's throw down on a bed and get busy, right? And it's fun, and there's a lot of excitement to that, and the novelty is great and wonderful. But then over time, what seems to happen, at least for us, is that we really are focusing on the community aspect, the people, that support system, because what we keep hearing over and over, time and time again, is that those are the people that really rally around you for vanilla things, like a parent dies, and those are the people that show up first.
Yeah, I think we're tribal beings, and right now the way we live in these, like, this quote unquote nuclear family, I don't think that's healthy. Like it's really not how we're designed to be. I feel this very strongly, and I think the one thing, and if we're talking about sex, the gay community, is like, I have so many different friends Some I've slept with, some of I haven't, some of, I still maintain sexual relationships with. Some of them, it's this wide spectrum. It's not a like either or, this binary way of thinking. And I think, the gay community it really does in many ways. You see the spectrum, and that helps you understand that you are not one or the other. You are also on the spectrum of all different axes. And it changes over time, and to be just connected and present to that, and to always question the rules around that, and that's been a fun way to live life, versus just sticking to one recipe.
Yeah. And that right there, what you were saying right there, that's that overarching theme that we kept resonating with, because that's what the community that we're part of is like, where you get that sense of freedom to express who you are, to discover things about yourself, and to be okay with redefining your sexuality as things change, and as you discover new things.
Yeah.
And we had another interview today, and we had a meet and greet last night, and the people in those communities were saying the same thing, and I love it. I can't not be with those open-minded individuals, because if I wasn't, I would probably shrivel up and die.
It's a sense of play and novelty, all that. I think we could all use a little bit more of in our lives, and so that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you've been describing how the gay community's fairly fluid in terms of like sexuality, kinks, and even partners, right? Like I've heard stories. I haven't actually been in that community, but I've had a number of friends who are in the community and heard stories about, there's some non-monogamy going in there, and it's actually kind of embraced.
There's a lot, yeah.
So what's interesting with that is in the swinger community, traditionally, it's been very anti-bisexual male.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That surprised me.
Huge stigma with it. For the longest time.
Oh, really? Oh,
you could not put that on your profile.
Right.
If you did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was like the scarlet letter. You would never put that on your profile openly.
Right.
And I have theories, right? Like I have a whole bunch of theories about that, but I think a lot of it has to do with the traditional definition of masculinity, and being bi, of course, is you're not a real man, right? And it's interesting. There's even some pushback on the term bisexuality in general, and that, well, look, just admit you're gay. It's like, there is no bi.
I get that. I've been part of that, in my earlier years of shaming bisexual men for just being like, this is yours, because I did it, right? This is your step to actually being gay. Like, just admit it. Yeah.
You're coping, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because in the last 4 or 5 years, we have noticed a pretty interesting shift in the community. There are more and more podcasters and public-facing people who are coming out about their bisexuality, and it's slowly starting to kind of erode that wall. And we were on a bliss cruise, a swinger cruise, a few years ago, and there was a bisexual couple right there on a bed, men, and the irony, of course, is that bisexual women are totally accepted, because that's the classic definition of
encouraged.
That's the porn, right? Like, ooh, look, the lesbians are going at it, right? Like, this was a situation where there were two men on a bed actually engaged in some form of sexual interaction right there in a public play space, and this isn't like a small play space. This was in the
solarium.
The solarium. So there were hundreds of swingers on 50 beds. Trying to do the math here in my head.
Oh, wow.
100 beds.
So there were a lot of people, and they were right there out in the open. This wasn't like in a corner. This wasn't in a a hidden shady place where they could kind of hide a little bit and be discreet. Like, it was boom, it's right there. And we were
I was
amazed
excited
by it. It was awesome to
like,
be
I
able
need
to see that.
I need to watch.
Because we don't have that taboo. Like, it's never been a thing. Like, we don't yuck your yum. Whatever does it for you, good for you. And it was nice to see such an outward and open expression, and nobody was like, oh my God, what are they doing? Like, it was like, oh yeah, they're having sex. That's just what they're doing.
Yeah, it was nice.
It's interesting because we're going through this kind of process, this awakening, this shift. In your experience, because you'd said that there's been a stigma in your community as well.
In some ways, gay men are the worst perpetrators of that kind of stigma. Yeah.
So talk more about that. I mean, tell us about how you've seen some of the shifts in the community, in your community, with that.
I don't know what it is. I think it is probably kind of old patriarchal ideas of what a man is. But I think, a lot of gay men would say they would never date a bisexual man because they'll just leave you for a woman, because that is an easier life, right? Less so now, but that is life. And then I think a woman maybe would say like, oh, well, you're really just gay, right? So no one wins, right?
Yeah.
I think it wasn't until I spent enough time meeting enough bisexual men where I was like, okay, like what, of course it makes sense that there would be bisexual men. And I think it totally makes sense that they are dealing with just as many, in many ways, more stigma today than gay men are in many ways. And so it's been, I think, heartening to see how there has been a shift, and it has been very recent. I think you're right, because the struggle I'm thinking is, I don't want to speak too much about this because I'm not bisexual, so I wouldn't necessarily. I don't want to speak too out of school, but it, even in my own self, I think as time goes on, you kind of, the more and more you think critically about a lot of these things. The rules or the distinctions or even the idea of identity, like of choosing an identity, makes less and less sense. I think in an ideal world, you kind of just leave yourself open to all possibilities, right? And so, and the idea, I get why you have to choose, like, for political reasons, for social reasons. But in many ways, it feels like we're trying to attach hinges to a phenomenon that doesn't actually exist, right? There is no one who is 100% straight, just like there's no one who's 100% gay, but we're kind of forced into these boxes. So the more we can, and that's not to say, like, I don't think that everyone is bisexual or everyone's pansexual or however you want to put it. But my hope is that as time goes on, we start to realize that, though useful, a lot of these terms and boxes that we're kind of forced to put into make less and less sense and mean less and less.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought that up. We've struggled with titles, with categories, with descriptions, and in the lifestyle, you put a label on your profile as a woman. Phoebe's had to struggle with deciding, how bi she is, right? And there's the whole, like, bi comfortable. There's bi from the waist up, right? Like, we've got all these funny ways of describing it in the lifestyle.
Bi friendly, yeah.
But there's also just the concept of you're a full swap couple or you're a soft swap couple. Well, what does that mean?
Interesting.
There's a classic definition for it, but because sexuality is so fluid, and because everybody's kind of personal definition about it, and it's a spectrum, it's hard to go, oh, well, this label means exactly this thing. Because everybody's interpretation of it is different, and they may feel a little strongly, one direction or another. And so the question comes down to, okay, well, how bi are you? Or what do you mean by that? Or the one that gets us all the time is, by women, of course, they want to have sex with all women, right? Like that's what it means to be. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. You're heterosexual doesn't mean you want to have sex with everybody.
Yeah.
Well, every, opposite gendered person. It kind of means a whole bunch of different stuff. So yeah, labels are hard. Labels are really challenging because it does feel like you're putting somebody in a box, and it's kind of more amoebic than that.
Yeah, and sometimes they, let's say you do have a attraction to someone who you maybe normally do not, or
Right.
Sometimes I think we think too much about what does this mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything other than you have an attraction to someone else, right? And I get why that's the initial reaction, because there are a lot of implications around who you're attracted to still that's just inescapable for this moment in time. But, I think what I've learned, at least through the process of making this film, is like just let yourself feel that. And the best thing you can do is just talk about it, talk about it with people you trust and love and who aren't going to judge you, and find that community. And, if you can talk about it with a person, or, it doesn't have to mean anything, other than something to then talk about. And I think if you can kind of just, before you let kind of a runaway train make this anxiety inducing stressful situation, in the end, right, the best part about sex is just connection with someone, even if you don't even touch. I've had more intimate, memorable, loving relationships with someone I only held hands with versus someone who has been fully inside of me. It's like,
right.
and it doesn't necessarily mean anything when you're on your deathbed. Like, what are you going to treasure the most? And to me, it is just the myriad of connections that feel truly intimate, present, and loving. And so I think, the more of that you have in your life, the better. So why not at least be open to all of it?
Yeah, I like that. Intimate, when you're on your deathbed. Yeah, you took me there, and I was in the hospital, I was on my deathbed, I was thinking, what are the most open, loving connections I've had in my lifetime? Who would those people be? Yeah,
sometimes I think we place an emphasis on quantity over quality around sex. At least I did. And that's been something I think I'm thinking much more around. I think my initial reaction to the Catholic Church telling me that gay sex was immoral and wrong, I was going to hell, was to have as much gay sex as possible.
Right.
Indiscriminately. That was my way of handling it.
Yeah.
Like, I'll show you. But I think it's taken time for me to untrain that, that I don't necessarily need, rather than focus on the quantity, or just just making that a prominent part, just thinking like, well, what are the actual connections I want to make, and how do I want to make them, and how much more can you be in the present in, during sex, right? Because that's, to me, the best sex is when you're just fully present. You're not thinking about what this means, or and you're just with the person or multiple people or whatever it is. And so that's been the biggest struggle, I think, for me, is to think about making every moment count as much as possible, and who that's with and how that's done can change day by day.
Yeah. And that kind of takes us over to consent, and how you can start having consensual conversations with people if you're interested in, connecting with them. There's an attraction, obviously, and then starts that conversation of consent. And consent in education, it's just starting. Like, I didn't even learn about consent until not really learn about consent until a year ago.
Right.
A year ago.
Yeah, I believe that, unfortunately.
I mean, and people just throw it around. Oh, consent. Oh, okay, yeah, yes. I say yes. Like, what? That was my extent of consent. Like, oh, sure, I know what it means. It means yes, right?
Yeah.
No. It's like it's multi-layered. And when I started researching that and getting into that, I was like, how do people not know about this? How is this not even talked about? And it was incredibly empowering and sexy, honestly, to be engaged in a conversation about consent, about what you want and what you'd like and what you want to do, what you want to share. how you want to do it. I mean, that right there was foreplay to me.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
And I felt honored. I felt respected. And this is all even before getting to the bedroom. So I'm like, wow, there is something to this. This is fantastic. And then I started thinking all the way back to how consent isn't even, as in growing up, as a child, you get pushed, little Phoebe, go over there and give grandma a hug. And, you don't want to, so even as a child, you're forced to do things. I get that, we're doing that to socialize our children and things like that. But there are a lot of times where parents will force children to do something and they don't want to do it. And they think it's in their best interest, but did you ask them? Like, is there a reason why they don't want to do that? So there's some like stuff all the way down to growing up about consent that I've just started to crack into, which is fascinating to me. My brain is geeking out on all the new information. So,
I mean, it's crazy, I think, that kind of the overarching message around consent, for the most part, is like, just say no, just say no, just say no, just say no. And then you turn 18, then all of a sudden you're supposed to be expected to understand how to say yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem. And I think my initial reaction to a lot of sexual interactions was that I was so not used to talking about sex. And so my initial reactions were much more of a freeze response than a affirmative consent response. And so that's been something that's taken a while to think through. I think luckily, being gay, there's no assumed sexual interaction, right? There's, you don't know who's going to be the top. You don't know who's going to be the bottom. You are forced to, in many ways, talk about things. You eventually learn that that before anything happens, you got to negotiate, like, what's going to happen? How's this going to, this is what I want. This is, what do you want? Do you like this? And just because it's two people of the same sex, so there are no obvious prescribed roles. And so that's the one thing I think, a benefit, I think, of being gay when it comes to consent is that you're just mechanically you're forced into those conversations. And then that's been a great learning for me to start to talk about things that I was petrified to talk about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that perspective. That makes sense. So now I know it's easier in the gay community than it is in the swinger community. It's also easier in the BDSM community because of that same thing.
They have it all figured out. Yeah,
right?
They should be the ones teaching consent. It'll never happen in my lifetime, I don't think, but they should be the ones teaching. Because I don't know if you've talked about this before, but because if you're doing BDSM right, the only thing that matters is consent. Because if consent isn't there and you don't have everything in place in terms of everything that's going to happen, it'll just go wrong. It won't be enjoyable for anyone. So
we've started exploring a little bit in that community, mostly for the community aspect of it, but also because of the sensual play aspect of it. And we had attended a class through a local group called Boundless. We kind of ran across them at the Folsom Street Fair. And it was a great course. It was an evening course. We did it online, and just going through the mechanics of having that conversation and the things that they consider when they go through those conversations was fantastic. We've been very strong advocates in the swinger community that we need to embrace a little bit more of that, right? Like, let's take a page out of their book in terms of consent and trying to turn it into something. It's like, look, this doesn't have to be mechanical. It doesn't have to be awkward. You can openly talk about sex in a way that's kind of fun and sexy. And I think that's been our main driver for those kinds of conversations.
Do you feel like fear of rejection is a big part of kind of those conversations? That's what I find often is the hard part to kind of talk through. Yeah.
Yeah, I think fear of rejection. I think that there's a fair amount of awkwardness just
Yeah.
in general, in terms of like closing the deal, right? Like you're approaching somebody, are they even going to like you? And then, you know, to have to talk about the awkward, you know, conversations about consent. And I think too, this goes back to the whole point of A Sexplanation in the beginning, which was we don't talk about sex.
Yeah. That's
Period. Hard. It's hard. Even when you're in a hotel takeover with 150 swingers who are clearly all there to have sex with other people, right? Like that was the purpose. We didn't go there for the snacks. Although some people do go there for the drinks and the dancing, but it's still awkward to have that conversation about this is what I want to have happen, right? These are my intentions for the evening. And I think to your point, a lot of that is that I don't want to get rejected. It's hard to ask somebody out in the first place, but to then put it out there and they're like, oh, ooh, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
I do think, part of consent education, there needs to be also like, how do you let someone down gently, right? Right. That has to be part of the conversation too, because it's hard to reject someone. And I've been in situations where I did things that I didn't want to do because I just was scared of hurting their feelings, which is crazy to think about. But but learning how to let someone down and learning how to take rejection in a way that it doesn't mean you don't. Again, it's not a shame. I'm not shaming you. It's just this was not meant to be, and that's hard.
Yeah, we just heard something. We'd been interviewed for a club down in LA that does something, and one of the guy, the creator of this thing, had said that they have a canned response for that, which is thank you for taking care of yourself and letting me know what your boundaries are.
Love that. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Wow, that sounds awesome. We all need to learn how to say that, right?
I'm like, I wrote that down.
It's like an affirmation.
You want to respect. I mean, put yourself out there in a way that's like, I want to have sex with you, and then that's hard, and to respect that and to honor that, because I think ultimately, I think the conversation with consent is like, if everyone understands the boundaries, then you can just fully let go and be free in a moment. Yeah. And like, I don't know any good sex that it doesn't have that, right? That you can really play and really be free and let go, because if there's a little part of your brain that is uncomfortable or unsafe, or if it doesn't feel good or is unsure, right? It just throws everything off. And so I think, the conversation often, I wish were framed a little. I mean, I get why, but it's often framed, especially in schools, is like, to prevent rape or abuse or violence, which yes. But we don't talk about the flip side, which is to promote, love and safety and pleasurable sex. Yeah. And so, I think we have to. I mean, that's never going to happen in schools, but so we need to talk. We need to, like what is the point of sex education? Is it to only prevent the very worst things that can happen, or is it to maximize the very best things that can happen? Right. And we are just, and I get why politically, I get why that's a hard conversation to have. But ultimately we're all having sex because we want the best things. But if we don't have the tools to set the situation up, and it's hard to do that, it requires knowing yourself really well. It requires amazing communication skills, empathy. But if you can build that, the places you'll go,
Yeah. We hear some of the most awkward situations in swinging situations tend to be, I was so concerned about my partner and her interactions that's all I could focus on. So to your point, right? You have this thing in the back of your head, and I mean, half the ED situations that happen in the playrooms are because the guy's freaked out because he's got to watch make sure his wife, his partner, is having a good time.
I get that. Yeah.
And you got to get out of your head in order to have a good time. And so if you had a really good consent conversation at the very beginning and like, this is what's on the table. We're going to do these 3 things. Won't it be a lot of fun? Then you're not worried about that other stuff. Because you just set the whole menu out and you're like, it's a 3-course meal and we're going to start with this and we're going to slowly work through this one. And then at the end, we're going to have some dessert.
Yeah.
Right? Like, sign me up.
The more relaxed you are, the better everything is.
Yeah.
100%. We have 4 more questions for you. Are you involved in any other ways to bring light to our failing sex education?
Any other ways? I mean, honestly, it's. I can't believe that I'm still having conversations about this film, 2-3 years after its release. So that's, one of the things that I'm hoping is that, it probably won't happen in schools, but, Planned Parenthood has taken an interest in the film, doing things like that. And so I think, being part of the groups, organizations, places where, they're not beholden to a school board has been a very, very interesting place to be in talking about these things and just trying to have more conversations about this, because again, I said, like every little baby step I think counts.
Yeah, 100%. And we are very, very happy to just promote the heck out of your film, because more eyeballs on it, more awareness, more baby steps forward. I think that'll help a lot.
Thank you. I mean, honestly, with me and the team just can't thank you enough, because it's been so. We can't tell you how meaningful it is, because we've put so much of our lives and thought into this, and the fact that it's resonating with people like you is just means more than you can imagine.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you were really talking about just the fundamentals of sex education, right? Like, not even really into the really kinky stuff that we're talking about, right? But that's the thing. It's foundational.
Yes.
And so if as a society, as a culture, we can't even be comfortable talking about regular, normative, patriarchal, missionary sex,
right.
There's no way that anybody's ever going to talk about gay sex or swinger sex or poly sex. Like, really?
Yeah.
Like,
we realized that very quickly, that in 80 minutes, we would love to have done more queer, kink, all that. But
there's always room for a sequel.
That's what we keep saying, is because we realized very quickly that people, I didn't even have a very fundamental understanding of all this. So we got to start from a very basic place. Yeah.
It's the alphabet, right? Like, we've learned the alphabet. We've started to form the basic building blocks of language. Now we can start talking about other stuff, which is super fascinating.
Can you reveal what you're currently working on?
I wish I could, but no. But this is something I think. I think one of the things that has been most interesting in this process is, how can you use comedy, humor, to melt people's defenses, right? To talk about difficult things. And that's what I hope, when you watch the film, that we keep a joke density that keeps you engaged, but also helps you understand, releases some of that tension around we all think this crazy thing, and isn't it crazy that we don't talk about these things? And so that's been a kind of our goal, is to approach a lot of different taboo subjects, around gender, around sexuality, around all these things. So hopefully soonish, we'll be able to announce some of our new projects around. I'm doing that kind of work, because we really hope that our hypothesis is that no matter your politics, your background, your upbringing, we have so much more that unites us, that we have similar, that we experience similarly than opposite. And so hopefully using comedy to bring that to light is something we're working on now.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's hard, right? You get the secret project and you're like, I don't want to release it, you know. Can't be like Deadpool and like release the test footage. And,
I mean, I would gladly talk about it, but I've signed that right away, put it that way.
Yes. Totally understand.
Which totally nixes my last question, or my second to the last question. So, because you're going to be like, can't talk about it. But
where can people find your films and tell us a little bit about your social media presence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I should probably be better with my social media presence, but right now I think if you want to stream the film, it's streaming on Freebies probably if you want to watch it free, and then the kind of home we've landed is on Peacock. So if you want to find it streaming on Peacock, that would be amazing. But if you want to find me on all social media, it's Alexander X Liu, my goal is to post more in the upcoming year, and hopefully I will have more exciting things to post. You know, I keep saying if you want to watch the film, if there are things you want to talk about with someone who matters deeply to you, our film is the perfect way to broach some of those subjects, because it's a great way to I get this question a lot, like, oh, so does that mean I should just, totally talk about every single thing I've ever shamed with? Like, no, that's probably not the right approach. Maybe you could have been clearer about that in the film. Or I get the question that's like, oh, I want to do this, but it's so scary, and I get that, and I'm always like, well, that's why we made the film. Sometimes it's easier to talk about these things through a third party, through someone that's not you. You know, what did you think about this celebrity? Or what did you think about this news event? Or what did you think about this film? And then you can start that conversation. And I think we do make it seem in the film, it was shot over 7 years, and it's an 80-minute film. So yeah, so it makes it seem like, in the course of a couple months I've had this big turnaround, but it was, little conversation after little conversation and little conversation. You get easier and easier in it, and they're, a minute, 2 minutes at a time, and then you'll be amazed if you do that work over 7-10 years. You can, your mom can call you a sloppy masturbator, and you won't flinch. You won't flinch. So it's been hopefully our film can help you move that one baby step that you need to.
Yeah, I love that you get to be the awkward person in the room when two people are watching the film, right? Like, they don't have to have that awkward conversation.
Right. I will take
here's
that.
Alex masturbating in an MRI machine. You're like, well, I thought I was going to have an awkward conversation. It's great. And I think, to your point, it does. It's like someone made a film about having this conversation. Someone went through that pain. I could probably do it too, because my conversation is going to be much easier than confronting a Jesuit priest or a a politician in Utah.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it's great. It's great. Alex, thank you so much for showing up on our show. We haven't done an interview in a while. We did them initially when we first started the podcast, and so we're a little rusty, but we couldn't believe that you even responded to our Instagram message.
Running around the house. Oh my God, he was fun. Oh my God.
Oh, I mean, I felt the same. If someone still wants to talk about this film, I can't believe it.
So you were probably the, quote, biggest celebrity that we've ever had on the show. So there you go. You get that notoriety. You actually have something.
For now.
Right. Big things to come, right? Big things. We appreciate you coming on. It's been amazing talking to you and kind of breaking this all down. And it's been fun for us to have this conversation with you.
I honestly, I can't thank you enough that you would even take the time to speak to us, talk about the film. It's just, like I said, we made this not expecting many people to see it, if at all, and the fact that it still has any legs at all, it's surreal in a way that's hard to describe.
Yeah. Well, as they say, the internet is forever, so this film will just keep popping up, so to speak. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you joining our community. Don't forget your homework, tell a friend about our show, and if you like, leave a review and comment, because every bit of engagement helps our show and our channel, and then more people get to see our content and learn all this great educational stuff. You can also leave us a voicemail at 916-538-0482 or contact us at swingeruniversity.com. And if you want to be anonymous, at swingeruniversity.com, you can leave us a 90-second message that is completely anonymous and tell us all the things you want to tell us. You can give us feedback, you can tell us a great story, or you can ask us a question, and we'd be happy to feature you on the show. And as we say, keep learning, keep growing, and keep it sexy.